Live.
Okay.
Welcome to Nurturing Our Roots, the journey from slavery to freedom, live Zoom sessions with Antoinette and Karen. Karen is not here today, and certainly she's missed, but I will be pulling this show off with my special guest, and we'll have a great time. And there's so much to learn tonight. We're live every Tuesday at 7 o'clock Central Standard Time. The talk show where ordinary people with extraordinary family stories can be heard. If you have a family story and would like to share with us, we would love to hear it. Please contact us at nurturingourroots@gmail.com. This is Antoinette. Karen is not here, but I would like to welcome my special guest, James Morgan III. And I would like for him to tell us about himself. And so I can go ahead and get us up live on YouTube. Let me just pull up something about this young man. And all right, James, now tell me, who are you, James?
Well, you know, first of all, let me thank you so much, Dr. Harrell, for having me here with you all today. I'm very excited to have this discussion with you. My name is James Morgan III, and I am an author. I am a historian. I'm a genealogist. I'm originally from New Jersey, born and raised. I say that all the time, and I'm proud of it. I don't care who knows it. I am the author of the book you see there, The Lost Empire, Black Freemasonry in the Old West, 1867 to 1906, which I'm sure we'll have some discussion about that tonight. I am very active, as you can see from the brief bio there. I'm a Prince Hall Mason, and I've been researching my family history for about 10 or 11 years now. And I've been speaking at a lot of conferences. I've been a panelist on Black ProGen Live for a number of years, as well as the Prince Hall Think Tank, which is a educational show on YouTube similar to what you all doing here at Nurturing Our Roots, where we talk about the history of Black Freemasonry and fraternalism. And so I'm all over the place. I'm a consultant, curation and programming consultant with the African American Civil War Museum. I'm a member of the James D. Walker chapter of ODDS. For those who don't know, that's the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society. So I'm all over the place. I get around. I don't stay still very long.
You've been very busy. Now, I have to ask this question to you because this is very important, especially being a young man. How did you start? Where did the interest come from to learn about your family history and to trace your family roots?
Certainly. The interest, I always say, started a couple places. One was that, I'm the oldest child of my parents. And so being the oldest child, I was fortunate enough to come in contact with a lot of elders in my family who are no longer here. I'm 31 years old, and I've met four great grandparents, and one of whom
That's amazing.
has thank you. Yes, indeed. And one of whom, my great grandfather, shout out to Professor Wildfeld Smith Jr., he has not been in the ancestral realm a full year yet. So imagine having your great grandfather for the first 30 years of your life and getting into genealogy and being able to interview him. And of course, we encourage folks interview your ancestors. I kind of shed a tear when I realized this, but I actually interviewed my great grandfather 7 years to the day before he passed.
Mhm.
You
So there
know,
was a lot of great
so
information connection that you really got from him. And did you record any
Absolutely.
of it and have it transcribed at all? Any of the interviews?
Yeah. I do for the most part I do video interviews with folks, and so I have him on video talking about his life and everything. So very fortunate to do that, to be able to have that footage. And it wasn't until the day, I think, or the day after his funeral, when I actually looked at the video, and then I realized what date it was. I said, "Oh my God, this was like 7 years to the day." So
Mhm.
I'm very fortunate in that regard. A lot of great aunts that I got to meet that are no longer with us. And then I'll say another spark for it for me really came into play when I was about 6 years old, or it started when I was about six. My grandfather, on my mother's side, uh, took me. In the summertime, I used to go to Dothan, Alabama, almost every summer for visits. And my grandfather took me out one day, and he took me to church. And it was a Saturday. I never forget this. And if you grew up, like I grew up First Baptist Church, South Orange, New Jersey. If you grew up in church like I did, and when you were a kid, you remember those days when you went to church and it wasn't Sunday. Because that wasn't on a Saturday. Let's be honest. What 6 year old wants to be at church? He takes me to this church, and he sits me down on the steps and tells me this story about his great grandfather. So that would be my great great great. That's three times
Really?
great grandfather, Reverend W.J. Hightower. And that Reverend Hightower, when he arrived in the city of Dothan, decided to build a new building for this church. And that he raised money, and that when he went to the brick factory in town, the man who owned the factory refused to sell him a single brick. The guy who owned the Dothan Brickyard refused to sell him a single brick because he was Black. And what Reverend Hightower did was he organized the local community through his networks, other ministers and whatnot. And everybody in the Black community basically banded together, and they started getting bricks, by any means necessary, as Malcolm X would say.
Wow, what determination.
Um,
It was determined.
ex- exactly. And
Mhm.
so they got bricks. I'm sure some of them were pilfered from the brickyard, or other places around town, but they got it to Reverend Hightower. He had him somewhere secure, and when he had enough bricks to build, that's what they did. He took the money that he made, that he had raised, and he paid the men who worked, paid the ladies for bringing refreshments and that type of thing, and they got it done. And that church today, at the time, it was known as Gaines Chapel AME, but
Mhm.
he changed the name to Cherry Street AME because he actually rotated the church 90 degrees to face Cherry Street. And when had this church erected, his name is etched into the cornerstone to this day. Uh, that church now is the oldest religious edifice in the city of Dothan, and it is a historical landmark. It is also considered the mother African Methodist Episcopal Church for the state of Alabama. And so my grandfather told me this story when I was six, and I knew it. Okay, that's interesting. Went through most of my childhood. Only I'll be honest with you, the only
It
reason why
wasn't
I
no big
remembered it, one of the
deal.
reasons, it wasn't a big deal to me, but one of the reasons why I remembered it was because I had this ancestor named Reverend Hightower, and if you remember the Steve Harvey show, his character was Steve
Mhm.
Hightower. That's what I just remember, the Hightower name. Flash forward, I am a graduate of Howard University as well, and will soon be attending Morgan State University this fall, going back to graduate school.
Congratulations.
Um, when I was at, thank you. When I was at Howard, I had a assignment from Dr. Charles Johnson, who I later would find out was a member of Odds as well. And the assignment that he gives is he asks students to research their family tree and think about a social movement or a major historical event like a war, what have you, Great
Mhm.
Migration, um, and come back and report on how that event affected your family or might have affected your family. And for me, I was like, don't nobody care about my family? What if I
Mhm.
come from regular old Black folks. Don't nobody
Mhm.
care. And then I thought about that story my grandfather told me about Reverend Hightower. And I started researching.
Oh.
Um, and I did enough to get the assignment done. But even though I got the assignment done and passed the class, I wasn't satisfied because by this point now I'm becoming a young researcher in my own right in other aspects, not so much family history, but in other aspects of history.
Mhm.
But it started to bother me that I could talk about and quote and talk about ancient dynasties of ancient Egypt and medieval Africa and all these different things of world history, but I couldn't tell you who my own direct ancestors were
Yeah.
who had been enslaved. But I could write you a paper about the politics of slavery.
Isn't that something, huh?
Every single right, exactly. And so that became a problem for me. And I did not like that feeling. And so I wanted to learn more. Even after I graduated, I continued researching. I started off researching the life of Reverend Hightower, as well as other branches of my family, my Weems family, my Ward family, my Glovers, my Morgans, which is my dad's side, the Baileys and the Curtises. And you know, here we are 10, 11 years later. You know?
So what did you learn? I know you learned so many things about your third great grandfather. Share three of the highlights of your research that really stuck out to you more than anything else in learning about your third great grandfather.
Sure. So the first thing I would say is that there was a photo of him. And I tell this story all the time, and it's still funny to me all these years later.
Where'd you find the photograph at? Where'd you find the photograph at?
I'm about to tell you.
All right,
I had graduated from Howard, and you know, I'm researching still. You know, I was out of, I'll be honest with you, I was out of a job. That's another thing that got me into genealogy. My first year out of college, I basically was not functionally employed. So that was genealogy also helped take up some of my time. But in the event, what happened was I was researching Reverend Hightower, learning more about the history of the AME Church and whatnot. And, you know, and one day I was on the phone with my grandfather. To this day, I still send him emails of things I find. And one day I just said to him, I said, you know, Granddad, I really wish that we had a photo of Reverend Hightower. I just wish I knew what he looked like. And he said, oh, I got a photo of him right here. And I said, well, Granddad, why didn't you, if you have a photo of him, why didn't you give that to me before? Like, why did it take so long? I mean, this is months after I had that initial assignment, right? And he said, well, you never asked for it. And so within 5 minutes of me asking for it, he emailed me the photo. And if you'd like to see it, I'd be more than happy to show it to you. Would you like to see it?
We'd love to see it. So where did he get it from?
Okay.
Do you know?
It was passed down in our family. It was passed down in our family. Let me see here. And here he is. Yeah. Can you see that?
Yes.
So this is my great grandfather, Reverend William Jefferson Hightower. And for those who are not aware what that PE means, PE stands for presiding elder. There are different levels to the ministry and the African Methodist tradition. And so you have traveling licentiates, you have deacons, you have elders, traveling elders at that time, and presiding elders. And then bishops. So there are some who would tell you that presiding elders are actually among the most important positions in the African Methodist tradition, because it is from among them that the bishops are elected. Okay. And so Reverend Hightower never got to be a bishop, but yeah.
Do you know if his family was free people of color or enslaved? Do you know?
Yes, I do. His mother was actually formerly enslaved. And his father, and this was another thing that really sent me off in another direction in terms of my family history. Now, if you look at me, I'm a pretty chocolate child. If you look at Reverend Hightower there, somebody got some explaining to do. Yes. Right. And that's exactly, and mind you, my family today, most of the people in my family today are my complexion or darker, actually. I have some light skin relatives, but not a ton. Not a whole lot. So when I first saw this photo, I was like, and I've always assumed that there's a white man in the woodshed somewhere. But now I'm looking at this photo of this man his blood courses through my veins. And now I was confronted with this. And I actually said, and then in that same conversation with my grandfather, I said, Granddaddy, I don't look anything like him. That's exactly what I said. And he laughed and he said, well, James, that's because his daddy was a white man. So what
year was he born, William Jefferson?
Yeah. Reverend Hightower was born on January the 12th, 1868.
Okay, 1868.
So he was born just after the Civil War. And the story that I learned from my grandfather was that after he was born, his mother and father came to an agreement that he would be taken care of and raised in his father's house, and his father would educate him. So Reverend Hightower, even though he was of mixed race heritage, our family oral history is and has always been that he was actually raised by his white father with his white father. His father's name, I would find out, was named Robert Tarplin Hightower. And his mother's name was Mahalia Baldwin, also Mahalia sometimes known as Mahalia Hightower, but also Mahalia Grubbs, because she actually got married. And so I'll scroll over
Did
just a
she
little bit
marry the
here. Let's
father?
see. No.
Oh,
So this is so these are actually two different marriage records that for Mahalia, or you may see her Mahalie, but they're to the same man. I apologize for not having a transcription, but this first one says Bill Grubbs to Mahalie Hightower. And then the second one is Willoughby Grubbs to Mahalia Baldwin. These are in fact the same people getting married on two different dates. One April 8th, 1866, the other September 8th, 1867. And the judge is the same, different location, but still in the same general area. And so to this day, I do not know why this occurred, but I do wonder if the fact that maybe she had been impregnated by a white man, or something of that nature, maybe she had children before. I don't know, but that is just one of the strangest things
repeat those
for
names
me
again.
to have
The
learned.
two men, the names, because I can't see that.
No problem. So his mother's name was Mahalia Baldwin,
I can see
or
that.
Mahalia Hightower, and then her husband's name was Willoughby Grubbs, or Bill Grubbs, and
Okay.
he was a black man. And so both of their names actually appear on Reverend Hightower's death certificate as his parents. However, our family's oral history, as well as DNA, has shown that there's some white male Hightower blood in that mix there, and our family's oral history has always been that Robert T. Hightower was the father of Reverend W.J. Hightower. So, that's our story, and I've actually DNA matched with some folks as well. So that's the power of DNA. So yeah, so that's one thing. Like I said,
have you reached out to any of the other Hightowers on the Caucasian side?
Yes, I have. And most of them don't really know anything about him, or even I found myself educating them oftentimes about the family itself. And a lot of them actually moved, the white Hightowers, a lot of them actually moved to Texas. And so there's kind of that generational break with the Alabama history versus a lot of the folks who went to Texas and Mississippi, and whatnot. But most of them have been very receptive. I had one or two folks that I might talk to you about offline that were kind of nasty to me, but that's okay. And it happens. So yeah, so that would be one thing. Like I said, just finding any records of him. I start off with a story from my grandfather, right? Now I've got a photo. I'm starting to get documentation, right? This is let's see here. This is just really brief. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh.
Yes, this is an image. I have another image of the church, a better one I'll show you, but this is a clip from the Heritage of Houston County, Alabama, a book, and the section that you see highlighted there or underlined there covers the history of Cherry Street AME Church, and specifically where you see there, Reverend W.J. Hightower was the builder of the present church structure in 1908. That confirmed the oral history that I had been given. So a lot of times, we're told that all Black folks have is oral history, whether that's in Africa or in the Americas. And a lot of times it's said in a very derogatory way.
It's a treasure.
It is a treasure. And I often say, yeah, use oral history as a guide, but we have a lot more documentation out there than people want to care to admit. And so finding this for me was very, very important. And I want to say shout out to Dr. Marty Olaf at Troy State University for passing this on to me. So being able to document him, like I said, having this amazing photograph of him, that would be kind of one thing I would say. Another thing, let me see, I'm trying to slide over here on my, there we go, screen. Another thing that I would say was very fascinating for me was learning that Reverend Hightower was an AME minister. I had to learn the history of the AME church, which at first was kind of difficult for me because I was raised as a Baptist. So I didn't know anything about African Methodism whatsoever. So I had to learn the history, starting off with Bishop Richard Allen, and the history of Mother Bethel AME Church up in Philadelphia. How did the AME Church spread? How did it eventually get to Alabama? And so one of the things that I would learn how to do is research the bishops who were the heads of the church at different points. I did not know at first when or how Reverend Hightower became a minister. Unfortunately, a couple years after his death, his daughter, my great-great-grandmother, Roberta, she accidentally set fire. She accidentally caused the fire, which burned down not only her home, but much of the black section of the city. So I apologize for laughing, but it's just like the irony, right? I'm a genealogist, and the reason why there's like this gap in information of that city's black history is partially because of my great great grandmother. So yeah, but in the event, I wanted to learn about when did Reverend Hightower become a minister and everything, and I was fortunate to find out, and it was actually very surprising. I learned that Reverend Hightower was ordained in December of 1899 by this man here. For those who do not know, who are not familiar with him, that is Bishop Henry McNeil Turner. Bishop Turner was a preeminent figure in the 19th century. He's considered a father of Black nationalism. He very much was an advocate for the Back to Africa movement. But in matter of fact, for those who don't know, more people actually went back to Africa under Bishop Turner than under Marcus Garvey. Okay, the best way I can describe Bishop Turner in a nutshell, if you take Marcus Garvey, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, and put them into one person in the 19th century, you're gonna get Bishop Turner. Okay, Bishop Turner was known for saying that God was a Negro, which kind of, you hear that drumbeat of the Nation of Islam's rhetoric, right? Another thing Bishop Turner said, which is one of my favorite quotes of his, is that he said that hell is an improvement on America where the Negro is concerned. Bishop Turner would put the American flag on trial in his sermons and talk about all the wrongs it had done against Black people. Now, this is a man who served in the Civil War, mind you. He was born in 1834 in South Carolina. He was a mentor to my ancestor. And as you see here in this document, in this newspaper article, Bishop Turner was the man who ordained W.J. Hightower, among others. Matter of fact, I'll also point out, you'll see a name here, if you can see my mouse, A.D.W. Mitchell. Reverend A.D.W. Mitchell was the pastor he became pastor of a church, of an AME church in Abbeville, Alabama, where my mom's maternal family is from. That town is also the hometown of Rosa Parks' paternal family. Our families are actually connected. A.D.W. Mitchell was Rosa Parks' childhood pastor. Okay. Also connected to Bishop Turner.
So all the
right
come together. Yes. When you're doing the research, all the pieces start to come together, and you'll see just how interconnected the community is. And there's no boundaries when you're researching, because everybody is connected in these small towns some way or the other.
Exactly. That's exactly correct. So finding out that he was connected to Bishop Turner, I mean, I have several documents showing that they were, where they interacted and where my ancestor was doing things on his behalf and whatnot. Matter of fact, in 1896, Reverend Hightower served as a marshal for Bishop Turner at an Alabama AME conference, and actually was like his bodyguard, one of his bodyguards, kind of helping him get through the state. So, I mean, finding that out was amazing, right? Also learning that Reverend Hightower was very active politically. He was a registered Republican. He actually went to the Alabama State Republican Convention and helped prevent a merger between the Republican Party and the Populist Party at that time, which was a movement of poor white farmers. That's what they said they were for, but they really were part of this lily white movement trying to push Blacks out of the Republican Party, out of state and federal government offices, and trying to make sure that Blacks did not have or exercise the right to vote. Reverend Hightower was a part of a group that was able to successfully stop that effort in 1896, although it was later successful in 1902 in Alabama. And so that was another thing that was just like, what? No one told me that. No one told me, growing up, we didn't know Reverend Hightower was he was a trustee at Payne University down there in which was formerly in Selma and later moved to Birmingham. And then another thing for me,
grandfather didn't share with you, maybe because he didn't know.
He didn't. He was just as surprised as I was when I started finding out some of this information. Right. I was able to find a photograph of Reverend Hightower's home. This was the parsonage of the church. Yep. This came out of the official history. This photo was taken and was placed in the history of the AME Church in Alabama, which was published in 1902 by Reverend Winfield H. Mixon. And this home was actually constructed by this man here, Reverend Still Paul Pryor, who was the first pastor of Gaines Chapel. So you see that church there. That's the original building of the church that Reverend Hightower replaced. When Reverend Pryor was pastor, he built that home which you see here, but he didn't live in it very long. Reverend Hightower moved in shortly thereafter, and our family lived there for a number of years. Okay, so having a picture of a home, right? My
That's
three times
awesome.
great grandparents. It's very possible the people in that photo may be my family. I don't know, but it's very
Exactly.
possible, right?
Exactly. And he had to
Yeah.
have some
Uh,
type of means of finances to be able to maneuver like he was maneuvering around.
Absolutely, absolutely, and we do have newspaper articles showing that Reverend Hightower and Reverend Pryor were very active ministers, very active fundraisers for the church as well, both locally
Mhm.
and on a county and state level, right? Another thing that I thought was just amazing and kind of ironic was that I'm very active in Prince Hall Freemasonry and in fraternalism. Coming to find out, Reverend Hightower was also a Prince Hall Mason, just like me. So I thought I was doing something original when I did that. I thought I was, I'm like, hey, I'm doing something here,
You soon found out.
I'm joining this old organization. And then I found out Reverend Hightower was a member as well. He was a member of Fairview Lodge 513, which you see there. And I also found out more recently that he was also elected as the supreme chaplain for the United Brothers of America and Sisters of True Love, which was a Black fraternal organization that existed in Alabama, Georgia, and Florida, and South Carolina at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know much about that organization, but I'm pretty sure it's pretty similar to the Masons and the Elks and whatnot, mutual benefit societies and whatnot. And so finding out again, like who knew? I mean, I didn't mention earlier, but I'm the grand historian for the most worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of the District of Columbia. And so here I am all these years later, a Masonic historian, got a book out on Black Freemasonry, and here I am all
Find your
100
own
over 100
ancestors.
years ago.
Yeah.
My own ancestor was in the same organization, and
Your
so
third
very
great
thankful to have
grandfather.
those records. Yes, ma'am.
Your
Yes,
third
ma'am. Absolutely.
Wow, that's amazing. I know that put a smile
Absolutely.
on
So
your
yes.
face when all of this
Oh
material
yes.
research was revealed.
Absolutely. It certainly did. Partially because studying the history of Prince Hall Freemasonry, you have one of the things that kind of was a back door to me studying the AME history was the history of Black Freemasonry. They're both very interconnected historically.
Mhm.
Bishop Richard Allen was an early member of Prince Hall Freemasonry. He helped start the second Black Masonic Lodge, which was up in Philadelphia.
Mhm.
And so the history of these organizations being linked, I kind of figured, I said, Reverend Hightower probably, and I spent a lot of time trying to find him. And then one day I stumbled upon this document here while I was up at Moreland Spingarn Research Center at Howard. And there his name was, right where it's supposed to be. And we also see Reverend Pryor there and some other notables from the community. I actually put together I have a broader presentation that I give where I talk about some of the other community leaders who were Prince Hall Freemasons in the city of Dothan at that time as well. And so I love sharing that history because it shows me that the work I'm doing today, I'm walking in the footsteps
Mhm.
of one of my ancestors, but actually I have other ancestors as well that were members of the fraternity down there as well. So yeah, I mean, finding that out. And then the last thing I'll just share real quickly, if you're ever in the city of Dothan, and then I'll come off screen share. Dothan is known as a city of murals. And
Mhm.
so there are several murals. There's one to a Tuskegee Airman that was from there, one that talks about a city riot that happened. But there's also one that talks about the history of Cherry Street AME Church. It's right around the corner from the
Yeah.
church.
Yes.
And that this image here is actually showing how the Black community was. And it's supposed to symbolize these girls look like they're picking flowers, but in actuality, they're looking for bricks that they would give to their fathers and brothers to help Reverend Hightower build his church. And so
That is
not only do we have this, thank you, yes, yes, indeed. Not only do we have this excellent, beautiful edifice there in Cherry Street Church, but we also have this wonderful mural that would not exist if it wasn't for my ancestors, work in building the church. And this is a photo of the church as it is today.
Mhm.
Um, and that's our family ancestral church on my mother's paternal side. And we're very proud of it in our family to
And
this
as
day.
you
So
should be. You
thank
should.
you.
Now, I know you said when you was attending Howard, you had to really see how your family fit into the history, because that's one thing that genealogy will do. Genealogy will help you to understand more than just the family connections, but the events that was surrounding your family, and your family was involved in many different things. Describe that feeling to me when you start to research and you found your third great grandfather, his contributions, and his name already written in print.
Oh man, I mean, he was gonna laugh when he hears this, but it showed me that my grandfather knew what he was talking about. One, and two, it was rewarding because, you know, again, I mean, I started out. I mean, I would say to anybody, especially someone who's very new at genealogy, if you're looking at this video, whether it's live or watching the recording, and you see this video now, I don't want you to walk away thinking that you can't do it because James Morgan had it so easy. No, that's not the case. I still feel like I've only scratched the surface of Reverend Hightower as well as my other family branches. I could spend hours talking about several different branches of my family. This took work. I mean, just to start getting documentation on Reverend Hightower, let alone I had to study the history of the church itself to understand that, how to study him, right? I mean, once I started really getting documentation and finding newspaper articles, it was rewarding and heartwarming too, because I mean, once I started finding things that my grandfather did not know and that other people in my family did not know, it really helped give a sense of pride or increase the sense of pride that my family has in this story. My grandfather oftentimes calls Reverend Hightower our family jewel because of all the things that he did. And, you know, to know that Reverend Hightower was, you know, he traveled to the 1912 AME Quadrennial Conference in Kansas City, Kansas, and or Missouri, either Kansas City, Missouri, one of them. And he was most likely in the same room with Booker T. Washington, who was the keynote speaker that year.
Wow.
Reverend Hightower was at the 1916. Right, Reverend Hightower was at the 1916 AME National Conference, where which was the centennial year for the AME Church, right? I mean, he was a trustee of a university. I mean, finding all this documentation, it really put life in perspective for me. I mean, I'm 31. Reverend Hightower was a trustee of Payne University by the age of 36. So now I got to get my butt in gear.
Yeah.
Right?
I do want to ask this question because we're talking a lot about your third great grandfather, but there's a saying, say, behind every successful man, there's a strong woman. Was he married? You know, do you know anything about his wife, your third great grandmother?
Absolutely. Yeah. Reverend Hightower's wife's name was Lizzie Griffin. She actually, her family originated from up in Russell County, a little bit further north of Dothan. Her family line actually includes the Griffin surname. So I'm a Griffin twice over in my different lines, actually, as well as the Everhart family as well. And so she was actually a teacher. She was actually also active with Reverend Hightower as well in the church and whatnot. And there's a newspaper article that I have that actually says Reverend Hightower preached. As a matter of fact, let me switch over real quickly. Hold on.
Was the church used as a schoolhouse? Do you know?
That I'm not aware of. I've not heard that one. I wouldn't be surprised, but I don't think so. But it's very possible. I do know that Reverend Hightower had relationships. Oh, here we go. That Reverend Hightower had relationships with a lot of the local, teachers and whatnot. And of course, like I said, his wife having been one.
Being an educator, yes.
Yeah, having been an educator. And I do come from a family line of educators, actually, believe it or not. So yeah. If you can see this slide here.
Okay, number 22.
You see that there?
Which one?
Where it says, yeah.
I see her.
You see that there? Okay, good.
Was she Port Indian or something?
Not to my knowledge, no. Just some light-skinned Black folks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, where are they buried? Where is your family members buried at?
I'm not. I'm assuming Grandma Lizzie is with him, but I'm not 100% sure. But they are most likely buried up in Clayton, Alabama, which is where Reverend Hightower was originally from, which is Barber County, which is not too far away from Eufaula. So they're actually buried up there at what they call the Old Negro Cemetery. I haven't had the chance to go there myself just yet, but
But
I'm
you want to
assuming that
make
they're
that
both
trip.
buried together.
You must make
Yes, yeah. Well, I do.
mhm.
I absolutely have to. Yeah, yeah. I have to. I wanted to go there a few years ago and didn't get the chance, but I definitely would like to for sure.
And what year did he
Um,
die? What year did he pass in?
Reverend Hightower passed on August the 2nd, 1935. So
Okay,
he was about I think he was 67.
so you was able to get a death certificate that really told you where he was buried at.
I was able to get a death certificate, and the certificate. So here's an interesting story. The death certificate, I don't think told me where he was buried, but it told me who had his body,
Mm,
the funeral home. And so I did research on that, and come to find out the funeral home that handled his funeral arrangements was actually bought out by another funeral home business, which still exists. I contacted that funeral home, and I said, hey, when I looked online, now Reverend Hightower died in August of 1935. Going on Google, Google says that this funeral home has
mhm.
no records before 1936. So I said, okay, well, let me just call and see. And I talked to this lady, and I won't say names or anything. And she was very adamant. No, we don't have anything before 1936. We don't have anything. I said, well, miss, that's okay. But if you wouldn't mind just checking around if you get a chance, I'd appreciate it. About 2 hours later, this woman calls me back and says, hello, Mr. Morgan. The strangest thing happened. I went into the garage or some room, storage room or something like that, and I opened this box, and there were some records from before 1936. And I found the record for W.J. Hightower was sitting on top of the pile.
Oh wow. I know you was so happy, and especially after you said, could you just check anyway? Could you just check and found
Right.
it? So when you found the record, what did you find on the record? Give us the information that you found on the record.
Sure. It mostly confirmed things I already knew about him. Like I said, I mean, one of the things that was very groundbreaking for me at that time was between his death certificate and then the funeral home record actually documenting the name of his mother and his stepfather.
Mm-hmm.
That was very important because prior to that, we didn't know the name of his mother or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to document who she was very important because then I was able to pick the trail up. Now I know Mahalia Grubbs, and I'm able to find her in the census and stuff like that. And also to confirm, like this is my Reverend Hightower. I mean, actually, I didn't have I didn't have a single document that had his full name on it until I got that record from the funeral home.
Mm-hmm.
Almost everything I had said W.J. Hightower. The census, I think one census, I think it was 1900, maybe listed him as William Jim Hightower or William,
Mm-hmm.
or it was Spanish. So I thought his name was William James Hightower at one point. But then when I got the funeral home record, it actually had his full name, Reverend William Jefferson Hightower. And I
And
knew it
what
was
age
him, not only
was
because of the
he?
dates, but also the addresses.
What
He was
age?
67 years old when he
67?
67 when he passed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was just an amazing feeling to be able to again document the life of this man, this great man who I descend from. It was really awesome.
And to be able to share that with your grandfather who's still living,
Yes,
they gave you information, and now you're turning around and giving them information that they didn't know. What a gift to share. What a family story to share. It's just beautiful.
absolutely, and it's bigger than just me and my family too. I want to say that because Reverend Hightower is the figurehead of that story with the bricks, but the people, the community did the work. He did work too, of course, but the people supported him. And so when I was younger, I mean, there were still elders alive that remembered having to take bricks to Reverend Hightower as children, right? Um, and the church is very proud of that story, very proud of him and the other pastors that they've had. And so being able to share the information with the community, every year Cherry Street does a Founders Day,
I was
and
about to ask you
usually,
about the history of the
Mhm.
church in those little publications, because on
Right.
Founders Day and the history of the church, they always put together these beautiful publications and history of the church. Have you
Mhm.
put your hands on any of those?
Yeah, actually, I contributed information to one or two of those type of publications, and actually every year, usually whenever they want to do something related to Reverend Hightower, they actually would have my grandfather to speak on behalf of the family. This past December, they broke with tradition and asked me to speak. If I would be the
Congratulations
speaker
to you.
on behalf of the family. Thank you. And so that was really awkward when I got that phone call. I said, "Uh oh." So let me call Granddad, and I was able to get his blessing. He said, "Yeah, I think you should do it. Go ahead." And that was a real moment for me of like, wow, I'm really doing this, because I mean, I remember as a kid, I mean, for years hearing about my grandfather speaking at that church, but for me to address the congregation, um, it was really mind blowing to say the
And
least.
and to have
Uh,
your grandfather to listen to you speak, to share your experience and your journey of research and all the information that you gathered, I know that was a very proud moment for your grandfather and a learning moment for him as well. Because although
yeah.
they had a lot of the oral history, but you had the skills and the know-how to dig into the databases and research online and go to the places and research and make connections and meet new people in other places, research facilities, and ask them to sort of
Hmm.
help you to locate other information. Now, did
Yeah.
your great grandfather, your third great grandfather, did he have brothers and sisters?
Yes, he had a lot. He had a lot, both black and white. And so one of the things that I'm still trying to unravel is the relationships that he had with them. Especially because I know from our oral history that he was raised around his white siblings. I was actually able to contact a cousin of mine who lives not too far from me here in Maryland, and she actually told me that she remembers hearing her grandmother talk about Reverend Hightower. So her grandmother was one of his younger sisters, and how there was some issues between some of his black brothers and him, in part because there was maybe some jealousy or what have you of he got to go to Reverend Hightower had I know he had a little bit of education, a little bit of money, but he wasn't necessarily day to day with them or with their mother. And
Mhm.
she talked about how she remembers hearing her grandmother talking about, you know, having to defend him, when some of his own blood brothers would, have issues or whatever you want to call it. And so that was, find that out was really interesting, especially, I didn't grow up with this particular cousin. Shout out to my cousin Ruthie, but but the fact that she was aware of who he was for sure, and she was like, "Yeah, I remember my grandmother talking about him and talking about how much she loved him and this and that third." But some of his own biological brothers maybe had some little envy or whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm. Now that you have all this research, what would you say, and you know what this research have done to you, what it feels like to be restored, what it is to learn about self, especially that male lineage, because being a man yourself and then learn about the strength and the shoulders of these strong men in your family, what advice would you give to any young man or young woman who may not think that researching their family history is important? And the second thing, tell them in your words what it can do. What did it give to you?
sure. I would say first of all, researching your family history is it's the story of you. You should know your own story. Researching your ancestors, especially the direct ones, but also collateral, helps you set a standard for what it is that you and your family have done and what it is that you still must do. And so, if you don't have that standard of understanding, then you're liable to fall for just about anything, and including
Mm.
thinking that you're not able or not worthy of success or of great things. But as we, talked about tonight, and I know you deal with here on Nurturing Our Roots and a number of other similar programs, um, we come from greatness. We come from great people.
Yes.
And regardless of the struggles or the losses, and we took some losses. we still claim victory because we're sitting here talking about it right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I say get that motivation to research your family history, so that then you have an understanding that your history as a person of African descent, while it may be touched by slavery is not the root of African
And it's not the beginning.
history.
Exactly.
It is not. Slavery is the interruption of African history.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so, and even with that interruption, we still not only rebel, we still claim the victory. Whether you want to talk about the United States Colored Troops, the AME Church, Prince Hall Freemasonry, whatever you want to talk about, we still claim the victory. Reverend Hightower's life, in and of itself, to me, is an example of that. I mean, his mother had been born enslaved.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there were a lot of things against him at the day of his birth.
Exactly.
But he was able to overcome them by putting his faith in the God of his understanding, and by being, first and foremost, being a man, or, you know, his wife's case being a woman, or what have you, right? And for me, that there's nothing that can replace that feeling of knowing my family lineage. And I can talk about a number of other branches of my family, but knowing that I come from ancestors who are institution builders. I come from ancestors who are educators and speakers, and absolutely.
Some self-empowerment
Absolutely.
has to be connected to that. And so for
Absolutely.
young people who may think that it's impossible, speak to, it's not impossible. That's coming from you, because look, I'm an elder, and to the young, me speaking to young people about research, it's just something that the elders do. But for a young man like yourself, I started in my 30s, and I'm 60. And so that time went by so fast, and I heard you say, you know, I've been researching for 10 years and you're still researching. Just speak to so that they can feel that there's something that ancestors want them to know. It's like meeting your ancestors, meeting those that came before you. You know, that's a profound moment for me.
Yes, absolutely. And I would say this to anyone who consider themselves younger or what have you, you owe it to yourself, because you probably will not have access to the information records. Again, I got to interview my great grandfather in my 20s, right? So I was cognizant and old enough to be able to have an intelligent, scholarly, and, you know, conversation with him. I'm glad I took advantage of that time when I did, because I can't do that now. He's deceased.